SpartanMag.com, SpartanMag Live. It's Tuesday night in East Lansing, Michigan. Gather around, get yourself a beverage. I've got one over here. We're going to talk Michigan State football, basketball. Got a lot of good questions from the mailbag. Mailbag questions posted over at SpartanMag.com, the Underground Bunker message board, and the Final Forum basketball message board. We talk Michigan State sports every day over there at SpartanMag.com. It is the Rivals.com site covering Michigan State sports. Haven't had one of these in a couple weeks. Great to be back. Great to have all you guys back. Sorry we are getting off to a late start. In the meantime, make sure to subscribe here to the YouTube Spartan Mag YouTube channel if you are not already. Looking at the analytics, I know that a lot of you do not subscribe to this channel. Subscribe to it. That'll help us out. Also, if you are new to everything that we're doing and aren't quite sure who I am or who we are, go over to SpartanMag.com. You can get a free 1-month trial subscription over there. See what's going on. See if you like it or not. Get addicted to it. It'll make you a better person. It'll make the world a better place. At least I think it will. We have a lot of fun over there. Been doing SpartanMag.com basically since the beginning of the internet. Keeps getting bigger. Keep getting a bigger base of Spartan Maggers. It's a great online community of Michigan State fans. And it's a safe haven. You can go in there and you can make a lot of enemies, but it's not that serious as long as we keep Spartan Vim in one corner and keep, I don't know, maybe who's usually lined up against him? Is it Marlowe? Marlowe was coming at me a little bit last week, and I kind of barbed with him, but it's all good. We had a good time with it. It was fun. Anyway, hey, we got some questions. We'll be getting into that. Let me move this light back a little bit. I'm getting too drowned out with all this. I'm going to knock the whole thing over if I'm not careful. We're casual here. We're having a good time. It is primitive, but we know our Michigan State sports, and we have a lot of fun with it. And what we do is we tackle some questions that were posted over at the Underground Bunker message board about Michigan State football and questions at the Final Forum message board about Michigan State basketball. In the meantime, we will take questions from the people watching live right now in the chat area. Got to move that so we can get Lynn Shadno in there a little bit better. We got to do that. And we'll take those questions, post them here. We'll take them as they come. We'll have a lot of fun with it. Again, if you don't know who I am, SpartanMag.com publisher Jim Comparoni. Been there since Spartan Magazine since 1993, something like that. SpartanMag.com since 1996, something like that. And let's go right to the mailbag. By the way, today, Izzo had his weekly press conference today coming off the big victory over Michigan, where they beat Michigan by 18 points on Sunday, the Breslin Center. One of the great atmospheres I've seen for Michigan State game. And I'm sure those of you that were there thought the atmosphere was outstanding also. And as it turned out, I'm not sure the team needed it all that much. The team's always happy to get that kind of support, but they had things well under control for various reasons in that game. Let's go, we'll talk a little bit about what was said in the press conference momentarily, but let's kick it off with the first question. All right, Hayden V. from Grand Rapids, Michigan posted, is the Ed Warner transfer to Michigan rumor true? And how much more attrition do you expect before the spring game? A lot of people want to know about attrition. Tim Stout always asks me about that. It's kind of hard to get a handle on attrition before it happens. As a rule of thumb, I would say in this day and age, anyone that's a third-year player, like a redshirt sophomore, that is getting surpassed by younger players in the playing group, usually that's a good candidate to move on. Ed Warner was a second-year player, I think, linebacker. It's an interesting situation. For those of you that don't know, Ed Warner announced he's entering the transfer portal, announced that a few days ago. Not a huge surprise when Michigan State had the issue with Joe Bacci becoming ineligible, and Michigan State had to reshuffle their middle linebackers. Noah Harvey basically became the starting middle linebacker. He's a sophomore, so that's going to be his job for the foreseeable near future. Luke Fulton is looking good as an inside linebacker, so the writing was on the wall there for Ed Warner that it was going to be real hard for him to get on the field. Did he want to stay and be a non-starter his whole career like Byron Bulla was? I mean, Byron Bulla was, they considered him a starter of sorts because he got a lot of playing time in the nickel defense. I'm not sure Ed Warner was up to that capability. So he moves on. He's going, as far as him going to Michigan, That's the rumor from a good source. Amy is a guy that posts. He's really well connected in a lot of ways, and that looks. I would lean real heavily, strongly on that rumor as being true that he's going to transfer to Michigan as a walk-on. He played a little bit against Michigan on kickoff coverage. Uh, you can play any number of players on special teams in some regards, but that's kind of my catchphrase. I'm going to try not to say that every single time. But um, it was my guess that he played against Michigan to showcase him for his dad. You'll see that sometimes. Sometimes people will make the travel team to go to their home state. Warner, I don't know how many games he played in this year, but he played in the Michigan game, and that was noteworthy for the reasons I just said. Now he's going to Michigan. Now, Warner, when Michigan State recruited him, I asked him, at that time his dad was an assistant coach at Minnesota. And I asked him, I've got to ask you, why didn't you go to Minnesota? Your dad's there. And his response was, no comment. Not sure what that meant. His dad soon left Minnesota. Maybe that's why. Goes to Michigan. Ed goes to Michigan State for a while. Was not going to get on the field. Goes over to the Maize and Blue. Now, Ed Warner, the offensive line coach at Michigan, a lot of people know that he and Mark Dantonio go back a long ways. They were roommates earlier in their coaching careers. And a lot of people thought that maybe last year Michigan State might make a run at getting Warner from Michigan's staff to join Michigan State staff if they wanted to switch things up there. Of course, they did switch things up. They demoted Mark Staten, they moved Jim Bowman from co-offensive coordinator to offensive line coach, which in some ways might have been, I think it was more work, even though he was co-offensive coordinator prior to that. Anyway, could Michigan State have went after Warner back then? And I thought it would have been a great move because got a chance to bring in a great offensive line coach who has ties to Dantonio. Meanwhile, you can hit Michigan in the kneecaps quite a bit with that one because for several years, Michigan was having trouble getting their offensive line situation straightened out. They finally get a good offensive line coach in Warner. If Michigan State could have went in and gotten him, and Michigan State's leverage might have been, hey, Dantonio has known this guy for years. Your son's going to be with us. Why don't you join the band? Could have made sense. I don't know what the contract situation was. To my knowledge, Michigan State never attempted to do that. It's just all the personalities were such that maybe Michigan State could have improved in one area and taken out an opponent at the kneecaps a little bit in another area. That being said, he is well compensated at Michigan. In order to get him to come away from Michigan, you'd probably have to pay him for more than $1 million. And if you pay an offensive line coach $1 million, then you have to pay all your other assistant coaches $1 million. Michigan State doesn't have that kind of money right now to be throwing around for assistant coaches, I'm sorry to say. Moving on here, Hayden from Grand Rapids says, thanks, Comp. Appreciate all that I appreciate you and your staff's hard work. I would agree with that. Our staff's hard work, Paul Konerdijk, contributions from Ricardo Cooney, Corey Robinson with recruiting, Rico Beard, all the gang there at SpartanMag.com. It's a labor of love. We have fun with it. We appreciate getting that kind of feedback. In terms of, do I expect any other attrition? Last year, quite frankly, it's my understanding, C.J. Hayes took a close look at moving on. Would he entertain that thought again? Because his snaps were down considerably late in the year as Trey Mosley came around and Julian Barnett more. I hate to put C.J. Hayes on the spot like that, but hey, these are big-time athletics. He asks a question. Hayden V8 from Grand Rapids did. I got to throw that out there. Last year, I was hearing that Cam Chambers, I hinted that an East Coast school might try to lure away an upperclassman. It was Temple. They were interested in Cam Chambers. I'm not sure how much, if any, Cam Chambers reciprocated, but there was a thought of mine last spring or summer that Cam Chambers could be a candidate to move on. He started the season with Michigan State, and as you know, midway through the year, he did enter the draft portal. So that's the wide receiver position. Dantonio says that they're pretty set at wide receiver right now. When asked on signing day if they would entertain if there's any position at which they would not consider someone from the transfer portal, and he said wide receiver. They're set there for good reason. So if they're set there with some good freshmen coming in, You wonder about some upperclassmen whose playing time has diminished a little bit. You would wonder about C.J. Hayes. You'd wonder about Larice Nelson. Larice Nelson's been a good, solid role player, played a lot early in his career, was an 11th hour commitment. He was very thankful to get that Michigan State scholarship offer. They're glad to have him, but would he look to move on, maybe go back closer to home to Florida for maybe a situation where he could play more elsewhere? Or is he just fabulously fine with his role? I'm not sure. I've not talked to him in a long time, but you ask if there's any more attrition. That's hard to know because a lot of times coaches are the last to know. But we did know about Cam Chambers a little bit last year. Question number 2, MSU Spartan 777 out of New Hudson, Michigan asks, he asks the same question. Do you expect any more players to leave the team? I just addressed that a little bit. How many more 2020 recruits do you expect Michigan State to get? I'm expecting 1 or 2 or 3. You know, they need a running back. They're still in on Frank Brown, as far as I can tell from Houston. I sent him a message earlier tonight. I've not heard back from him again. He's supposed to be deciding. He's been advertising that he's going to be deciding pretty soon. Did he post something like January or something like that? Not sure. But Frank Brown at running back, Jordan Simmons from Georgia, if you're not counting him, Michigan State still has some work to do with him, in my opinion. We've been reaching out to him and his people a little bit, his father, to find out if his visit has been scheduled yet. Quite frankly, the Terry Samuel question is a big factor in both of those recruitments. He moved from wide receivers coach to cornerback coach last year. Cornerbacks, defensive backs did not play well this year. Mark Dantonio having talks with coaches this week. We've talked about that on the Underground Bunker message board. That's insider information. That's not something that Michigan State's out there advertising right now as something that's taking place. But Terry Samuel, he's been recruiting well here with Jordan Simmons and some of the other players from Georgia. If Terry Samuel's job security, I don't know that it is in question, but let's just say devil's advocate, if it is, if he doesn't stay on the staff, then Michigan State's chances of getting Frank Brown from Houston, which is Samuel's hometown, or Jordan Simmons, with Samuel having been the key recruiter there, Michigan State's chances, I don't know what happens to the chances at running back if that happens. So it's just something that's life in the big city. That's the business right now. As far as other players, you know, Ennis Rakeshaw from Duncanville, Texas, cornerback. He's scheduled an official visit for Michigan State the weekend of January 31st. Alabama offered him this week. You probably saw some of that discussion on the Underground Bunker message board at SpartanMag.com. He referred to Alabama as his dream school. That's big. Now, during the spring and summer when Alabama offers you, that doesn't mean much. That just means they're offering you to come to camp and try to win a scholarship. When Alabama offers you this late, probably means a little bit more. Interesting that Alabama would go ahead and offer him. Kid from Duncanville, Texas. Good frame on him. He has also set up official visits to Missouri, Miami of Florida, and remains to be seen if he will visit Alabama. There's not many weekends left in January. This weekend's going to be January 10th. Weekend after that, Miami. Weekend after that, Missouri. Weekend after that, Michigan State. So Michigan State's looking for a corner. You know, they were also looking for Rashad Battle, but, you know, Arkansas is coming on strong there. That's the 6'3" corner from Georgia. He was originally committed to Maryland. Georgia Tech is seen as running strong there. Not sure if anything's going on with him. I don't know if Corey can probably answer that when Corey's here with us. Corey Robinson joining us in the chat area. We appreciate that. Good to have Corey back. As far as today's news, really interesting in Izzo's press conference today. He was talking about the time in the Michigan State game when Gabe Brown was yelled at by Xavier Tillman. There was 9:04 left in the second half, and Gabe Brown missed a box out on David DeJulius. DeJulius gets an offensive rebound, goes back up for the shot, and Xavier Tillman blocks it out of bounds and immediately starts yelling at Gabe Brown to get the box out. Great team development there in that little snippet, because Izzo has been on Xavier Tillman and Cassius Winston to become more vocal leaders. He backed off of Cassius Winston for obvious reasons for the last couple months. Tillman, it's not been his personality to go after teammates like that. But Izzo has gotten other people to become more vocal and demanding in their leadership when they've become upperclassmen. You know, that was not something Kenny Goings would have done much, but evolved into being that type of player. Matt McQuaid became that type of guy. In the past, there have been guys that never quite got there. In 2001, Michigan State had a really good team, great defensive team, great rebounding team, not a great three-point shooting team. Made it to the Final Four for a third straight year without Mateen Cleaves. And the leaders that year were Charlie Bell and Andre Hudson. Izzo loves those guys dearly, still does to this day. But when they lost to Arizona, one of the things that Izzo said in the aftermath of that game and that season was he needed some of those seniors to have been more forceful leaders, needed guys to be more comfortable hearing themselves talk. And he thought that that was something that the 0-1 team lacked. And ever since then, he's gone out of his way to try to bring more of that out of people, whether they naturally have it or not. Xavier Tillman brought it out that day. It's the first time we've seen it on the court. And Gabe Brown responded well to that, played well afterwards. But Tillman getting after guys, listening to what Izzo says, that they need that from him. Tillman wants to be a national champion, so he's going after it. The good news is all of his constituents, all the other players in the locker room, realize that Izzo wants him to get on them. So that helps it be less personal and more business. That's what that was. Gabe Brown's got the type of personality. He can take that and use it as fuel. Izzo said today at the press conference that he was not aware that that happened during the game. I can't remember what his exact quote was, but it was something like if he had seen that during the game, he would have went out and hugged him right then. Izzo saw it when he went over the film and said that something along the lines that I think he said if he would have seen it then, he would have called for a statue to be built right then of Xavier in the parking lot right next to Irvin. Izzo loved it. Saw it on film, loved it. They went over it in film. One of the first things that went over that in film when they had a brief meeting, I think Monday, they didn't have practice and nothing official, but that film was going around. Izzo showed it to him because he loved it so much. He thinks that's great team development. You know how Izzo is. Izzo talks about the importance of a team being a player-coached team and not just a coach-coached team, because you know how Izzo says about that. It's a big deal. Needs that. That from Tillman made Izzo's weekend. That happened. Izzo said that he was hearing from a lot of players, a lot of coaches around the country. So many people were asking him about that and saying what a great thing it was. And it was really easy to see because as you're watching it, Tillman was angry, and you can lip read that he was yelling, Gabe. You could see who he was talking to. So that was good TV work by CBS to bring you right on the floor to see what was going on there. And those of you that are big Michigan State fans, those of you that are astute Michigan State fans for many years, realize the backstory and all of that and how Izzo's been calling for that for a long time and delivered. Other news today, Izzo said that Aaron Henry has to stop getting stupid fouls. Had 2 fouls, had to sit out in the first half. One of them was in the flow of the game. The other one he felt was unnecessary. Izzo's like, can't have that. They need to get a better idea of what Aaron Henry's going to give to them every single game. It kind of goes up and down. The effort has been good. The rebounding's been good. I think he's had 8 or more rebounds in 4 of the last 5 games. They're happy about that. They gave him a new and important defensive role in this game. He guarded the point guard, Xavier Simpson. They didn't do that last year. Aaron Henry was an important defensive player as the season went along. Last year as a true freshman, they are giving him more and more defensive responsibility. That was a game in which they put him on a point guard, did pretty well. That's new. That's a trump card they can have in their hand for later in the year. Would he play defensive point against Maryland or against some of these other good point guards that remain on the schedule? That's an interesting weather balloon that Michigan State floated out there, and Aaron Henry did a good job with that, but they can't let him get those early fouls. Izzo also said, maybe he'll start playing guys, someone like Aaron Henry, with 3 fouls in the first half rather than sitting them. And then Aaron Henry, I'm not sure if he got another foul the rest of the game. You know how that's been a controversy around Michigan State for a long time, the way Izzo does it. He's 50-50 on that, but for him to change, maybe that's just lip service. Izzo saying maybe I've got to start playing people in the first half with 2 fouls. Maybe he's just saying that to back off people that are criticizing him, because people do criticize him, and he does hear it, and it does affect him because he wants everybody's approval. So he puts that out there to maybe get people to back off a little bit on that. Is he really considering it? Would he really play Aaron Henry with 2 fouls in the first half of a big game? Probably not. I'll believe that when I see it. But that's what's on Izzo's mind right now. As far as Xavier Tillman goes, at the press conference today, Izzo said that they're working on Xavier Tillman to be a little to fine-tune some things in the low post, because had a little trouble scoring in and over and around Teskey. Izzo said that when you're in there in the post, posting up, and you do your shuffle dribble, his quote was, if you're in there doing your shuffle dribble in the post, quote, a 7-footer is not going away if you don't move him, unquote. I took that to mean moving him with footwork and timing and things like that. Andre Hudson was always 2 shuffle dribbles in and then shot the other way, or it might two shuffle dribbles this way and then back to his left hand. It was a certain rhythm to it, and I'm sure if people saw it on film, they could key into it. But he was moving with the dribble and didn't dribble too much. So look for Tillman to develop a little bit more of a plan, change of direction, quicker footwork, different movements in the low post going forward. Let's go to the questions here in the chat area, then I'll get back to the mailbag in a second. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tweet out to try to get a few more people in here. We're always trying to be inclusive, trying to bring more people in, right? So I'm just going to take a second here. Bear with me for a second. SpartanMag Live is live. I'm tweeting right now. See what kind of riffraff that brings in. All right, let's see. Corey's here. He's our bouncer if we get any wise guys like we did a few weeks ago. Hayden Vischer tells me the sounds good. Thanks. Rob South checking in from Clinton Township. What's up, Rob? Rob South again. Seems like our basketball program is finally starting to turn a corner. A little concerned about Rocket. Seems like his speed is not up to what we are used to. Is he getting close to 100%? Izzo is hoping that Rocket can practice consecutively this week. And Izzo indicated that he's not practiced consecutively lately. So the speed, no, I don't think it's quite there. Get that back to breakneck speed, running those lanes. That is what he's going to do well. That was one of the things that initially really impressed the Michigan State coaches at the outset of practice. Then he got injured and slowed down and so forth. Running the lane, outside lane in transition like Charlie Bell is something he can do and will get back to. You can mark my words on that. So don't judge his speed just yet. Program finally starting turning the corner. Do you mean the team this year started to turn the corner, or do you mean the program? Because the program has been turning the corner since 1998, my man. It's my Pete Townsend waving a runner in move. So I'm gonna give you a pass on that and assume that you misspoke with your text. Is the team turning the corner? Yeah. I tell you what, they made a lot of great progress with their practices during the Christmas break. And those games at home against Eastern and Western were good, solid, mid-major opponents. There's a difference when you play Eastern and Western, some solid MAC teams, even Oakland, with an in-state chip on the shoulder against you. That's tougher than playing Presbyterian or UMass Lowell like Michigan did. And Michigan State destroyed Oakland, Eastern, and Western. Destroyed them. Meanwhile, Michigan State hasn't had to travel. The Northwestern game was a brief, easy travel. They've been able to stay home, circle the wagons. Then school was out for 3 weeks. Just basketball. Dealt with some nagging injuries. But you can see the traction that's been made. Now they stay at home again for another one against Minnesota. Playing all these home games, it's like Izzo said today, playing all these home games is good, and Paul and I talked about that in the VCast after the game. It's been good for this particular team, this particular year with the issues they've faced. It's been good for them to not have as many road games, basically since what? The Rutgers, since the Seton Hall game. This team has needed a chance to get together, spend time on themselves. And in theory, the Big Ten schedule's been a little bit weaker, but you look at Rutgers, they just beat Penn State tonight, so Rutgers is 12-3. That was home. That was a struggle. That was kind of a struggle, but that was a challenge. We didn't know how much of a challenge it was at the time. Izzo told us it was a challenge, but Izzo says everybody's a challenge. Point is, the schedule: Rutgers and Northwestern first. Now Minnesota at home. It's not like they've been asked to go to Ohio State and to Maryland just yet. That being said, Ohio State lost tonight to Maryland. They're now 1-3. They were close to being number one in the nation a couple weeks ago. So, Izzo always talks about the need to get a lot done during the holiday break. Says it every year. Some years he's really happy with the progress they make in Christmas. Other years he kind of sometimes thinks that there are missed opportunities. This year, no question about it, they capitalized on that opportunity during Christmas break, and the schedule has been helpful in that regard. Also, with the Big Ten schedule creeping in to the other side of Christmas and it starts early, if you're not careful, the Big Ten schedule maker can give you some tough hurdles early on, combined with whatever holiday travel you have going on, and you might not get a chance to get home and work on things and rest a little bit. Michigan State had a great midseason boot camp. They are better, and it was all about the practice. All about the practice. Stu Redmond says that Vim guy needs a timeout. We got our eye on him. Let's go back to the mailbag football. All right. Oh, we got multiple questions here from MSU Spartan 777 out of New Hudson, Michigan. He asks, where would you put the percentages guess on what do you think it is that Michigan State will pick up a quarterback transfer? Well, Michigan State, according to my sources, has shown some strong, serious interest in a grad transfer quarterback. And they've shown interest in KJ Costello. That's been reported and documented, and I have verified that. And according to my sources that are on the Costello side of things, Costello says Michigan State is really showing serious interest. So is Costello serious about Michigan State, or is he just keeping options open, waiting for other things? He's interested in Georgia also. Jake Fromm from Georgia, is he turning pro? If he turns pro, that could change a few things. I hear that Costello is also interested in Washington State. Would he stay out west? I don't know. Costello did some really good things early in his career. This season was not so great. Now, Shea Patterson, in a way, kind of was in the process of losing his job at Ole Miss, a lot of people thought. And I think he was outplayed by another guy during his last year at Ole Miss. Costello's been good, but he would have to scrape to retain that starting job at Stanford. From what I can tell, there's no Justin Fields out there. But nobody knew that Joe Burrow was Joe Burrow, although he hadn't been on the field yet. Tate Martell going from Ohio State to Miami, not a difference maker. Hurts going from Alabama to Oklahoma, difference maker in terms of helping Oklahoma keep their thing going. There's no Hurts out there this year. There's no Justin Fields. So, the transfer portal quarterbacks have had a huge impact on college football in recent years, especially this year, especially the college football playoff. Will it be that way every single year? I'm not sure. It's always going to be a big talking point. Was this year special? Maybe so. In terms of that many making that big of a difference. What I'm getting at is don't I wouldn't assume it's going to be that type of free agency at that position every single year. And just because you get a transfer portal quarterback doesn't mean he's going to be a huge difference maker. Now, Illinois had Peters from Michigan, and he helped them get to a bowl game. So Michigan State's in there with Costello. They're serious about him. That could give you a little bit of an idea of what they think about what they have coming back. They're excited about Peyton Thorne. He's young. In the meantime, they may not want to hand everything over to him just yet, but they just want to improve their pool of talent. Anthony Brown of Boston College. I've not heard anything about him lately. With the holidays, Christmas, New Year's, just a few days ago, got out of my routine a little bit. I've not checked back in with Anthony Brown. Some of you might know something about him that I haven't. But the last I heard, Michigan State was interested in him, and he might visit in January. An interesting guy. Jamie Newman, the guy from Wake Forest, in the portal. I was listening to McElroy and the guy from Florida State, former quarterback for Florida State. I always forget his name, but they're really good. They have a great talk show on Sirius XM. They think Newman is the best quarterback in the portal this year. And they're talking like they think that Michigan should go after him. Anyway, Anthony Brown's out of Boston College. This year he was injured at Boston College. It was his redshirt junior year. He threw for 258 in the first half against Virginia Tech, finished with 275 that day. A guy that's a decent runner. He rushed for about 30 yards that day against Virginia Tech, did Anthony Brown, a guy from Boston College. There's been some reported interest between Michigan State and Anthony Brown, a quarterback. Against Kansas this year, was 18 out of 36. Against Rutgers, he was 13 out of 25. Not great numbers. Against Wake Forest, 21 out of 29. Good. Against Louisville, 6 out of 7. Then he was injured. In those games, he threw for 195 yards, 159, 265, and 193. Good one. Not a great one. I mean, this is not Jalen Hurts we're talking about. But could Michigan State use a good one? Yeah, they seem to be going after them. Where is Michigan State on them? It's going to be tough to find out because finding out with portal information is even harder than finding out what's going on in recruiting information. Because like I've said, a lot of these guys have been recruited before, and they've had enough of all that kind of attention and fanfare the second time around being recruited in a portal. They totally shut it down. So we will keep our ear to the ground on that one and stay tuned because I don't think anything has moved lately with Costello, but keep an eye on the Fromm situation there. Also, he asks, and this is the big question, 33 minutes into the podcast, what is your latest guess on how many coaches won't be back? Well, we've been talking about this since late October, right? And I've been saying I was expecting 2 or 3. And then Graham Couch had that tidbit on his podcast saying that he had heard from his sources, and he's a good reporter, and he's had good sources, saying that he's heard that there are going to be no changes. And he said that they had some meetings after vacations, and that's what they arrived at. Some of that information matches up with what I'd been hearing. I'd been hearing for the previous day or so prior to him posting that once Dantonio got back from vacation on Sunday, there would be meetings, and some of those meetings would almost be like he'd be re-interviewing those guys as coaches. My word, not Dantonio's word. Look out for that thing. So the stuff about getting back from vacation and getting right into it, I heard that. Graham heard that. Graham heard that he's hearing that there's not going to be any changes. Is that information even more current than mine? I thought maybe so. Maybe the meetings started and Dantonio, through his sources, Graham's sources, had made it clear or had come to the realization or had sent out word to his coaches or whatever that, yeah, there's not going to be any changes. That is possible as of, midday, late day on Monday. Is my understanding he was going to meet with every coach. Could he do that all in one day? I was thinking that might be something that would take more than one day, and I was told initially that it would be meetings throughout the week, or at least for a few days. So was that information a little bit premature? Was that someone's conjecture? Well, Graham's source has been right on, so I'm taking that at face value, that that's a good source, and that's definitely something to consider. My sources are saying that it's not a done deal yet, that final decisions haven't been made. But what you know about Mark Dantonio, what I know about Mark Dantonio, a loyal guy, maybe to a fault. Some of you criticize him for that. You're free to feel that way. Is it possible that he sits them down for these exit poll interviews or discussions, meetings, and looks across the table and sees somebody that he's coached with for 5, 10, 15 years, and just at this stage in his career just is not comfortable pulling the trigger to send the guy on the road? Is that possible? Yes. Is it possible that he had it in his mind a week or two ago that he was going to fire somebody, and then as the time grew closer, won a bowl game, went on vacation, mellowed down a little bit, deciding against it? Is that possible? Yeah. There's a friend of mine, we were talking about this. We were at a Lions game on December 15th. Friend of mine, big Michigan State fan, and he's a tough business guy. He's talking about, man, Michigan State, he's not in media at all. But he's like, man, Michigan State, they got to get rid of some coaches. Dantonio's got to get rid of some coaches. A lot of you feel that way too. And I said to my friend, I'm like, look, man, we were at the game with some of our friends. Our friends like, Mike was there, Jeff was there. A couple others were there. You don't know them, but I'm just making a story here. Friends of ours. I said, if you were Mark Dantonio and you had $40 million in the bank and you're the winningest coach ever and you've won 10 games or more 6 times, Rose Bowl, college football playoff, and your legacy is already complete. And he was like, no, his legacy's not complete. I'm like, he doesn't care about his legacy. He does, but he's comfortable with it. Most coaches, when they're firing coaches, it's because they're looking to improve their situation to chase goals and, in some ways, improve their situation for their next job. Antonio's not worried about his next job. This is his last job. I said, if you were 63 years old, $40 million in the bank, and somebody came to you, an athletic director, donors, a president, and said, look, coach, you can stay, but you got to fire a couple guys. I said to my friend, I'm like, would you fire Mike and Jeff? Or would you tell this other guy to go take a hike and just ride away with your $40 million? That's what Mark Richt did at Georgia. They wanted him to fire his son, I think. And Mark Richt said, you know what? I quit. Now, that's Georgia. They got a lot of horsepower. They went out and hired Kirby Smart, and they recruited like crazy for a couple of years. But they still haven't gotten much better than what Mark Richt had gotten to. They made the right decision for them, probably because they're a superpower. They should be going to be the best in the country, and they were 1 yard away from beating Alabama in the SEC title game and going to the championship game and beating Notre Dame to win a national championship under Mark Richt not long ago. But there's nobody at Michigan State right now that would pull that on Mark Dantonio. Some of you might think that's a weakness, and Michigan State needs that. But if you do that with Dantonio right now, again, I think he pulls a Willie Nelson and just rides away if you do that. Maybe that's the best thing. I'm not sure it's the best thing or worst thing. My point is, when you're that age of a coach at that stage in your career, at some point soon he'll be retired. And when he retires, he's going to want to be able to look himself in the mirror. The day that George Perlis was fired in 1994 at his press conference, one of the things he said was, I never fired an assistant coach while I was here. And right now I feel really good about that. There were times when I'm sure he considered doing it. There was a coach or two that they bumped upstairs to an alumni administrative role, but he didn't turn anyone on the streets. And I know those of you that are fans really want the best in the program and desperately want Michigan State to be as good as Michigan State can be, but that's just kind of where Michigan State is right now. That type of person Mark Dantonio is. I'm not apologizing for it. I'm just saying that these are the personalities and situations and dynamics at work, and I could see it going that way. Even though in October I thought for sure 2 or 3 coaches would be gone. From a political standpoint, from a business standpoint, if you're a Michigan State athletic personnel, a member of the personnel athletic department, or the coach, These jobs, like I've always said, are like political jobs. To be head coach at a big state university like Michigan State is a political job in some ways. You have to understand which way the political winds are going, what your constituents, your fans, what they are thinking, and you have to do things to appeal to them or kowtow to them. This is business. It's politics. If he were a 55-year-old coach still trying to make his way at Michigan State from a political standpoint with what the offense has failed to produce in recent years, definitely the political decision to make, the business decision to make is to cut people and bring people in. And that would make people happy for a little bit, for maybe a year or two. Maybe. Probably not. That's what you do when you're weak and you're looking over your shoulder and you're trying to keep people happy. So he's not there. He doesn't have to worry about it over his shoulder. Like I said, he can just ride away anytime he wants. But as a personality, I go back to what Perla said in 94, and these people have to look themselves in the mirror. That's a part of this. Secondly, he's a competitive guy. He's a confident guy. Anyone that becomes a coach at that level is competitive and confident. He's done it before. He's won championships before when no one thought that he could. So what's he thinking now? He's thinking he can do it again. Back when people told him he could never do it back then, he went out and did it. They're telling him he can't do it this way now. His personality type, he did it last year. He might say, I'm going to do it my way again. Hell or high water. We'll see what that means. All right, let's go to some other questions here on the chat area. We're already 40 minutes in. I got to stop with the run-on stuff. I apologize. Let's get a couple questions here. Dan Camhout says, thoughts about reports of Coach Dantonio bringing back entire staff. I just went over that. Lost my place here. If you're checking in from Twitter, glad to have you. I threw a Twitter invitation out a little while ago. Get yourself a beverage. I've got one here. I'm not going to tell you what's in it, but we're having a good time in East Lansing on a Tuesday night, talking Michigan State football. It's always football season. Always football season at SpartanMag.com. You can go back and watch this later for all the great stuff you missed at the beginning, and it was great stuff. Where's my place? I lost my place. JJ Huddle 79 says, 2021 state recruiting. How do you think we are looking? Hopefully Corey's got the answer on that one. I've not looked at 2021 yet. I've looked at basketball, but I'd have to pull up my files on that one. Rob South, any new? But I tell you what, JJ Huddle, it won't be long till we get the Rivals camp coming in the spring, and things will take shape with winter football offers, junior visits, people visiting for the green-white game. That's coming soon. The holidays were kind of busy. I don't have all my notes together for 2021 yet. Still working on 2020. Rob South, any news on the football staff? I just covered that. 313 Hitman says big win over Hayes and Fluke. Go green. 313 Hitman. Is that you, Tommy Hearns? I got a picture of me and Tommy Hearns somewhere around here. Bob Every introduced me to him at a Michigan State game back in about 2000. He came to a game. And I did see Tommy Hearns at that Lions game on December 15th. He was there. I didn't say hi. I just let him go by. Appreciate Tommy Hearns. Appreciate that right cross he landed on Pepino Cuevas at Joe Louis Arena in 1979. The biggest right hand, the hardest right hand in the history of the welterweight division. Trust it. 313 Hitman says, I hate to say it, but Hayes and Fluke got the edge in state. Yeah, they did in recruiting this year, football, but they didn't recruit a lot in state. Is that what you mean? What do you mean by the edge? Got the edge in state. Hayes and Fluke got the edge in state. I don't know what you mean, 313 Hitman. Hayden Fisher says, Corey, you retweeted today that MSU made Chris Paul Jr.'s top 5. What is your feel on him? Potential first commitment? ? Glad Corey's here to handle that one. 313 Hitman back at it says, at least we got some size and a couple of the wide receivers in the latest class. Okay, you're talking about in-state recruiting. You're right. Michigan State in-state recruiting, not good this year for football. We've talked about that in previous podcasts. Got off to a slow start in the spring. They were late on some guys. And I've said before that I think the coaching shuffle kind of loosened some of their recruiting area responsibilities a little bit. And if any coaches see this and they disagree, call me up. We'll talk about it. But that's the way I saw it. I talked to some recruits that said Michigan State was late. You could say that Michigan State was late on some guys because they had done the evaluation and decided they didn't like the guy. Maybe that was the case on a couple of them, but probably not the case on a couple others. Hold on a second. But 313 is right. Michigan State's got to get off to a better start in-state this year. And Huddle was asking about it. I got to start looking at the in-state situation because Michigan State's not going to want to get off to another slow start this year. Corey Robinson answers, Chris Paul Jr. is definitely a name to keep an eye on. He wants to make spring and summer visits and decide in the summer. Will be an early enrollee. So that's Corey with info again. Noah Conley says, your thoughts on how Winston, Tillman, and Bingham are playing right now. This Michigan State basketball is scary good. Can't wait to be in the O-Zone at the Minnesota game Thursday night. That's a 9 o'clock tip-off. That's kind of late. Noah, make sure you load up on the caffeine. Noah says, Winston looks a potential Naismith Player of the Year candidate right now. Noah, I agree with you. Nationally, I'm not sure that there is anyone like a Zion Williamson right now that is like taking over. Cassius Winston made big strides this weekend with that game. National TV, doing some amazing things. He's a great story. Everybody pulling for him. Story in the New York Times today about him. Yeah, I think Winston's back at it, and I can't remember if I mentioned this in the VCast or in the article, the .comp article after the game. But I tell you what, in October I was at a couple of practices and I was watching Winston, and he just looked quicker. You know, he's always quick, but there was even more quickness to him. I was like, man, he's gotten quicker. Then the tragedy happened, and obviously for good reason. His practice scaled back, conditioning scaled back. Conditioning was not what it was for good reason. Wasn't working out as much. That's well documented. Not getting in the extra time. That's well documented. Whatever happened during Christmas, what you saw in the Michigan game was a return to some of that quickness. He's always been quick, but there's another level he's gotten to. That quickness that I saw in October was back this weekend. Now, they're going to face defenses that are better than Michigan's, so he won't be able to slalom through there like Ingemar Stenmark. But you could see he was special, and that was a special day. So, National Player of the Year, yeah, Winston is right back squarely in the ring for that one. As far as this team, you're asking my thoughts on how Winston, Tillman, and Bingham are playing right now. Marcus Bingham is a good one, and he's an important one. Because, I mean, from the beginning of the season, Izzo's been looking for a power forward for someone to take over that job, and nobody has. Today at the press conference, he said, you know, it's going to depend on the opponent sometimes as to who gets those minutes. And someone else asked a question about this, and I'll get to it in the mailbag a little bit later, because somebody asked me about the power forward situation and how I see it shaking out. Actually, it was Secor Sig, the former coach, who does a great job. We really appreciate him on the Final Four message board. Former high school coach, ton of basketball knowledge. He asked that question: how I think it's going to shake out the first week in March or the first NCAA tournament game. Who gets the most power forward minutes? My answer is Izzo doesn't even know right now. He was hoping in October somebody would take the bull by the horns, take that over, and it never quite happened. So Bingham played great defense against Coburn in the Illinois game. I asked Izzo about it a couple days later, and Izzo's like, you know what? I hadn't seen that in practice. He had not seen Bingham play like that in practice. Then they see it in a game, and it's like, okay, that kind of changes the ceiling of potential there, or how quickly they can, how much they can fast track him. They were excited about that. Then they put Bingham out there against Teskey. Michigan went right to Teskey, scored 2 or 3 field goals against him, 2 against him, 1 against Tillman early. And I mentioned in the pre-tip read, if you had time to read that before the game, I said Teskey is really good with his touch and his defense early in the game. But as the game moves along, he gets more and more tired, and the touch goes away, the scoring touch. He doesn't shoot as good a percentage the more tired he gets. Also, defensive movement really wanes as the game goes along. And some of that ball screen defense for Michigan, he becomes a statue in it with ball screen defense. So we talked about that in the pre-tip read, and that was the case in this game also. Posted up Bingham. I went back and watched it again. Bingham a little bit late getting to his spot. Didn't make first contact. Izzo thought he needed to fight harder for post position. Early in the second half, he did fight harder after Tillman, and I think Winston really got into Bingham about it after Izzo told Winston and Tillman, you guys got to get on him. Izzo saying, the coach can only do it so much. You guys got to get on him. So they got on him. Bingham played better. But he still only played 12 minutes. Malik Hall played 18. Malik Hall only played 2 minutes against Illinois. Comes out in this game, plays 18. That gets to your point. It's like one day it's this power forward and it's this one, minutes-wise. The next game, it goes like this. Kithier used to start, playing 5 or 6 minutes now. Good news is he's not pouting about it. He's playing hard. And you saw him running hard. And picked up some fouls. But you asked about Bingham. Bingham is a big X factor. Big X factor. You can see he's a great aircraft carrier, as Al McGuire used to say, around the rim, loose balls, rebounds, block shots. It's good to have him on the court, but against some teams, is he going to get carved out of there and moved out of the way? As tough and strong as he played against Coburn, you'd have thought that he would have stacked up better against Teskey. Michigan State wins the game. But it's good that Bingham was exposed a little bit because that takes him back to the drawing board in the film room to understand what things he needs to do and cheat on to get a little bit better and really get into that film room to get as many nuances as he can against upcoming opponents, just so he can just cheat to this shoulder or that shoulder or get to a spot before a guy gets to his favorite spot. Those little things can help him, and he needs those little things. Otherwise, he'll get buried like he did against Teskey when they play good teams. So, tough day for Bingham, but he learned. Where he is in the next 15 games will have a big factor on where this team is. Made a nice three-pointer. That was after Winston left side ball screen. I think they iced it. He took it down to the corner rather than taking the ball screen to the middle. Took it down to the corner. Drew Teskey, pulled him out. Rotation. The 4-man rotated over to Bingham. Made a three-pointer. So important for Michigan State to have a 4-man that can stretch for, that can make that shot. You have to have it in today's basketball for any team in any system, including Michigan State's. Kenny Goins came along, provided that last year. Bingham makes that three-pointer early, missed one later. Three-point shooting's been around 20% for him this year. I'm not going to pretend that he's going to become a 35% three-point shooter from this point on, but if he did, that'd be make a big difference. Malik Hall, of course, rescued Michigan State with 3 three-pointers in the Seton Hall game. I think he's only made 1 three-pointer since then. That was against Georgia. Attempted a three-pointer against Michigan, air ball. So if you're playing Michigan State now, Malik Hall's in the game, you sag off of him. Regardless of the Seton Hall film, you sag off of him. You help on Cassius Winston. You leave that guy open, try to react out to it, and you make him prove that he can beat you. That's where Michigan State is. That's where they are good, getting to very good right now. To go from very good to championship, they need to stretch forward to do a number there. Let's go back to the mailbag. Football. All right, so MSU Pat for Parts Unknown wants updates and rumors about the coaching staff situation. I've already gone over that. DYK says, when does spring football practice begin? Does Coach D survive the 2020 season? DYK getting right at it there, isn't he? When does spring practice start? I'm guessing around March 25th, but they've not announced it yet. They're still having coaching meetings. Does he survive the 2020 season? I mean, if they go 6-6 next year, he might be ready to say, okay, that's enough. But at this point, it's his call. But, if you have, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, you have 5 seasons of 500 football. In the past, in this program, that's usually what gets you on real thin ice. I understand he's the winningest coach ever, and everybody loves him, and he is a great steward of the program, regardless of the smear campaign that ESPN attempted a couple years ago. Everybody in the athletic department knows what he's about, and I wouldn't say that if I thought that it was disingenuous or he was disingenuous. I don't think so at all. So, in the past, when you've had that many 500 seasons, Bobby Williams had 2, and then the third one went down the drain. John L. Smith had 2 or 3. Had a good one in his first year, then it went down the drain. I'm not comparing him to them. He's obviously built up a lot more equity than those guys. Perlis went up, ruffled a lot of feathers, unlike Dantonio. Ruffled a lot of feathers so that when things went downhill, 91 and 92, almost got fired in 93, went to a bowl game. Mayor Lee Dean Baker tried to fire him after the bowl game that year. And other people went against her, didn't have the votes, so he came back another year. McPherson expected an outstanding season, didn't happen, done. And he'd gone to a Rose Bowl 7 years earlier. So Dantonio has said that he says, I'm not naive to knowing what's going on here and what we have to do. But again, I'm telling you, he's competitive, he's optimistic. He likes a challenge. He's going after it. So, 500 next season. I think if he wanted to forge forward, I think he would. But I think that there would be a lot of... the heat that took place this year would be more intensified. But I think he could survive that for another year if he wanted to. That's my guess right now. When we get to September and October, we'll have to wait and see. But I'll also say that, hey... it's not easy to win at Michigan State, and he's raised the standard there. And like he said, he's fully aware of where the standard is now, and he's the one that created that standard with his great coaching, the job he did in his first 10, 11, 12 years. So, there's differences of opinion, and we will be talking about this for the next 10 months, and we already did last season. I'm not going to get into it because we've already gone about an hour, but short version of it, Michigan State, it's not easy to win at Michigan State, and a lot of people say, well, that shouldn't be a deterrent against you. You got to be thinking that you're going to be great no matter what, and you can't be afraid to make changes and chase greatness. That sounds good, doesn't it? But there's one guy on the planet, that knows how to win a championship at Michigan State at this level and to have multiple seasons in the top 10. You know how many weeks George Perlis spent in the top 10 in his whole career? 1 week after they won the Rose Bowl. They were number 9 in the country. That's the only week he spent in the top 10. You can fact check me on that. I'm pretty sure that's the case. Just came into my head right there. I could bore you guys and go through the media guide right now, but I'm pretty sure 1 week in the top 10. Yeah, you could chase greatness and bring in Harry Houdini to coach. But when you've got a guy as the head coach right now who is the only guy on the planet that's ever won here to that level, I can see those in the athletic department that are like, okay, let's let him ride it out. He thinks he can fix it. Let's let him do it. In geopolitics, I don't talk politics, but tough news night tonight around the world. A wise man, a lot of people have said, going back 15 years ago or so, it's a lot easier to start a war than it is to end a war. It's a bad analogy, really bad, especially with serious stuff going on right now. But it's a lot easier to fire a coach than it is to hire a coach. Yeah, you can hire somebody, but then 3 years later you can fire somebody and fire someone again and again and again and again, like Georgia did 3 or 4 times before they hired Richt and then ran the course with him. Or you can go like Tennessee, keep firing people. Anyway, Texas, Michigan, and they got a ton of horsepower. They got all the bells and whistles. So when you've got a guy that feels energized, that thinks he's got a chance at it, I can understand those that feel like, let's just keep working the plan. It is true that it's gotten stale. And somebody on the message board was talking to some high school coaches in Ohio, and I think it was Strategic who said that, and that those are good sources, and that's a good word. It has gotten stale at Michigan State, and they do need to change some things. And if it's the same coaches, I mean, last year some of those offensive coaches were on one-year deals. That was a signal in some ways. Then they went out and had another bad offensive year. Should they make changes? Well, the production needs to change. Recruiting needs to change. Can those guys that are on staff now, can they get it done? That's up to the one guy who's gotten it done. So we'll see. I'm just your friendly neighborhood reporter right now. I'm not on either side of the aisle. I understand both ways. That's what it looks like to me right now. And I understand those of you that are very emotional about it and angry about it. And it's January 7th and they won a bowl game, but here we are talking about it already. Good bowl game. I've not gone over all the film yet. Good job by Gillison making a game-breaking play down the middle, showing some speed. Been waiting to see that for a year and a half. That was excellent, right? Trey Mosley, excellent. Cody White taking a step. The running back situation looking better. Offensive line did a pretty good job. We'll talk more about that. We got plenty of time during winter football to talk about some of those situations. As a matter of fact, 84 Spartan is his name. Question number 6 from the Mailbag. He is from Lake Fenton, Michigan, and he says he's a proud former East Side Flintster. And he says, football question. If you had to guess right now, what will our starting offense look like in the opener against Northwestern? What will our starting defense look like against Northwestern? Most interested in your thoughts on the O-line and quarterback. I can't do offense and defense. Offense, I mean, running back situation looking solid to healthy. Eli Collins, Anthony Williams, Brandon Wright. Don't know if Jordan Simmons is coming in as a true freshman or not. Wide receiver looking good with Cody White, Trey Mosley, and Jalen Naylor flashing some horsepower in the bowl game. Wide receiver looking pretty good. Some incoming recruits also. Tight end, Gillison. Solid job by him. Dotson. You know, there were some indications Michigan State was looking at some transfer portal tight ends. The one guy from Ball State that was looking around with Michigan State, we kind of thought or heard that there might be something going on there. He is enrolled at San Diego State, so that kid's not around. There was a tight end at Alabama that was interesting. Was it a tight end or a tackle? A reserve. Not heard anything about that lately either. But tight end, you got to expect Gillison and Dotson to really mature. It's time, right? Dotson got hurt again, Achilles. I would not be surprised if he sits out spring. Don't quote me on that. That's not what anyone has told us from the training department or anything. But an injury like that for a senior, he's been through enough spring practices. He doesn't need to practice, I would think, in the spring. But offensive line, I think our Curry, I got to watch the bowl game, see what our Curry looked like. I think there's a chance as a second-year starter, I think that there's a chance that he could take it up a notch. Just getting comfortable this year. He looks good. He looks the part. He moves well. He's got some strength. Just an experience thing there. I think our Curry could be good at left tackle. Left guard, Duplain. Maybe Samac moves to guard. Matt Allen played center in the bowl game. He's back. So maybe Samac competes with Duplain. Luke Campbell's there. I think that's a good, healthy competition at left guard. Right guard, Jarvis should be back. Missed all of this year. Missed half of last year. Was what, third team All Big Ten as a true freshman? You know, that guy's got there's nothing against him. He's been injured, but by this point, he should be an All Big Ten type of guy, right? Jordan Reed played well at the end of the season. So our Curry, Samac, Allen, Jarvis, Reed, pieces are there. You should have a quality offensive line. I realize the line was not quality this year. Injuries, moving people in, moving them out. But each one of those individuals has individually played well at some point. Now, collectively, it shouldn't be unfathomable that you should be able to mix them together and get a good line out of that deal. Does Jim Bowman coach them? He's been thinking about retirement. It's that, it's that age, right? Dantonio likes Bowman. Not sure. Quarterback, Peyton Thorne, Theo Day. Lombardi's been number 2 all year. You know what Lombardi is. I do think he has improved, but you need to be much better than he was, obviously, as a freshman. Is he better? We didn't get to see enough of him to know. But spring practice is going to be really interesting, and it's going to be really quiet. And then we will see the green-white game. And that's going to be, from the quarterback position, the most important, interesting green-white game since Kirk Cousins against Keith Nickel. And in that green-white game, they both threw for 300 yards. They were both great, and they both looked good, right? They both looked promising, and they both ended up being promising. Cousins ended up being a great quarterback, and Keith Nickel would have been a great quarterback, I think, if he had the opportunity. But they made the right decision with Cousins, but Nickel was that good. They both threw for 340 or whatever it was that day, and that sounded great, but the defense was not good. And that year they went 500, 6-7 actually. So, word to the wise, when the green-white game comes around, you don't want Theo Day to throw for 400 yards and Peyton Thorne to throw for 400, because that means your defense has problems. You never want to shoot out in the green-white game if it's, well, it depends on how you divide it up. Back then they divided up to the defense. Now they basically go ones against ones. You don't want your first-string defense getting lit up, no matter how it makes your offense look. Anyway, victory for MSU. His name is Steve from Stevensville, Michigan. He says, who is Old Tuck? I don't know if Old Tuck's here today. I don't know who Old Tuck is. That's a secret. TMC79 from Birmingham, Michigan says, who in the MSU, this is a good one, who in the MSU athletic department has the ability to unite the MSU alumni base to build donations for the football program? Who in the MSU athletic department has the ability to do that? Well, there's different kinds of athletic directors. There's administrators and there's fundraisers. Beekman's not really a fundraiser guy. He's there. Dantonio and Izzo brought him in there because things were a little bit unstable. They liked him. The board was okay with it. The president at the time was okay with it. What's good enough for Izzo and Dantonio, they rolled with. Smart decision at the time. Because they kind of Izzo and Dantonio needed to know that everybody was going to be on board and just row forward. When Hollis and Simon went down, I said back then that they were really going to miss those two in terms of fundraising. Two of the great ones in terms of fundraising. Hollis was great at it, very, very good at it. And since he's been gone, it's my understanding that the fundraising thing, as Hollis used to do it, with some of the key donors, has fallen to Dantonio. And Dantonio's been the one communicating in terms of what's needed and trying to get donations. I've not talked to Dantonio about that. A lot of that stuff is behind closed doors, upper level stuff. But you don't need your head football coach to be worried about that stuff. So they need it. Someone needs to do it. Dantonio's doing some of it. As of who in the athletic department has the ability to do it right now, I don't know. And that's something they need to figure out. To go after the Dan Gilberts, the Gorses, the other ones. The names on the buildings, and a lot of people have done a lot of great things. But I'm not sure. And that wheel fell off when Hollis was gone. And to my knowledge, it's not been repaired and put back on. You can email me if you know something different, but that's my understanding. Dan from Royal Oak says, how many spots are left in the 2020 football recruiting class? How do you see the coaching staff finishing up? Dantonio on signing day said, maybe we'll have room for 1, maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 4. So he's being coy about it. But really, they could make room for 4 if it's the right 4. But they weren't 100% sure. And I don't think a lot's changed since then. So I'm thinking a total of 3, 1 or 2 recruits plus a transfer. That's my guess. J.D. Gerber from Hazlitt. Everybody's from Michigan today. If you're new to the podcast, in past podcasts, we've had a lot of questions from people from all over the country. That's usually the way it is, but today it's only Michiganders. J.D. Herber says, do you expect another Dantonio press conference before the late signing day? Last year for late signing day, they didn't have a press conference. So if they're only signing 1 or 2 players, I don't think they'll have a press conference for it. I'm almost positive that they won't. Will he have another press conference? Last year, he had a press conference to announce the staff reshuffling. Will they do that again? I mean, whatever decision he makes for the staff, there's going to be some, even if he decides to stand pat, I would imagine he'd want to have a press conference to announce it to end speculation. And also to get word out there so that his coaches can recruit with some backing. So, yeah, I think there'll be a press conference of some sort. Not sure if that would coincide with the signing day or when they make any decisions about staff changes. But, yeah, I would think so. And it might not be the most comfortable situation. About ready to wrap up football here. We'll go back to some basketball and then get to the questions here in the chat area. Fergando is his name from Grosse Pointe. He says, if Dantonio brings back the whole band together next year with no significant changes, is 2021 a make or break year for him? I'm guessing he means is 2020 a make or break year for him. And I kind of addressed that a few minutes ago. Fergando says, another 7-6 season or worse with no adjustments, and I think he completely loses the fan base. He says 2018, bad. They turned on, actually, that was something else. But, so he says, I think he completely loses the fan base. He lost a little bit of the fan base, 2 years ago when things went bad on offense. Dave Warner, the offensive coordinator, became a pincushion for a lot of the fans. A lot of the people really blamed him and gave Dantonio a little bit of a pass. And then when Dantonio demoted Warner and went with Salem, a lot of people didn't think that was enough of a change. They wanted real change. And I've contended that what they should have done is taken Brad Salem, changed his name, and put him in the Bobby Valentine mustache glasses disguise. And then I think a lot of people would have felt better about it. So 2018, Warner took it. And then 2019, the offense didn't get any better in a lot of ways. In some ways it did, but didn't look better against the top teams. So then the crosshairs went on Dantonio. They were unlike past years. So if it happens again and it looks the same, then yeah, the people that were upset this year will be louder, and there'll probably be more people joining them. That's the way it is. So is it a make or break? In that regard, probably is, and that schedule is tough. Schedule's going to be tough. Ronnie671 says, why do you wear a tie in some of the VCasts and not in others? I don't know. It depends on if my shirt's ironed or not. It depends on if I've got a... Now, the one or two of the ties were gifts, right? I wore a tie for the Maryland football game, end of the year, and I brought one to New York but didn't wear it. And wore one of the Michigan game. It was Sunday. It was an afternoon game, wore a tie, I used to wear ties a lot back in the 90s. Late 90s into the early 2000s. Got away from it. A lot of people have gotten away from it. But I wear a tie once in a while. Sean from Grand Rapids says, have you heard anything in regards to the Jordan Simmons recruitment lately? Recently, Georgia has released their 5-star running back from his national letter of intent, and I'm wondering if that will affect anything. I've not heard about the Bulldogs being involved with Simmons. LSU was at one point, but I've not heard anything about that. We're trying to reach out to the Simmonses to find out when that visit's going to take place. Michigan State still has some work to do there. 313 Hitman says, we got to stay healthy before the tourney. No more injuries, Cassius. And we got some flames there. Hitman's all fired up. Good to have him part of the party here. Noah Conley says, be in the I-zone, laugh out loud. Autocorrect. Okay, O-zone. I think that's in Columbus. So glad that you'll be in East Lansing for that one. 313 Hitman's back. He says, I hope Tillman and Arns can keep it going with Cassius the rest of the way. I would agree with that. And you might have noticed that Kyle Arns was flat on his stomach on the sideline watching some of that game. I don't think he's done that before. I don't remember seeing him do that. That's the old Rick Mahorn position, laying on the stomach. Hurt his back a little bit in that game. Had the Achilles. It's one thing after another. Tough kid, good kid. A guy that last year when the season ended really thought that he was done, thought that he was going to get married and retire. And then around the month of May or June, he decided, you know what? I still have it in me. I want to play one more year. Interesting story. Kyle Arns, very popular guy on the team. So Michigan State is 12-3, 4-0 in the Big Ten. Looks a lot different than it did 5 or 6 weeks ago, right? They got Minnesota on Thursday. Minnesota just beat Northwestern. It was the first time Minnesota's beaten Northwestern in Minneapolis in 7 years. I was surprised to hear that. Minnesota's 2-2 in the league, 8-6. You know, last year I think Minnesota was last in the Big Ten in 3-point attempts per game. Might have been last in 3-point makes per game. But a team that made the NCAA tournament, made the second round, graduated a lot of tough guys. They have Kelcher back. They have Oturu back. This year, they lead the Big Ten in 3-pointers made per game. So they went from the fewest, now the most. They're jacking up 3-pointers like the old Rick Pitino teams used to do under Richard Pitino. The sophomore Daniel Oturu against Northwestern, 19 points, 16 rebounds, 5 blocks. The guy's a force, and that'll be a good matchup for Marcus Bingham. Bingham really good against Coburn, not so good against Teskey. Now he gets another test against Daniel Oturu, one of the more improved players in the Big Ten. That'll be good for Bingham. Elsewhere around the Big Ten, Purdue only played, they scored 37 points in a loss to Illinois. They lose 63-37. The fewest points scored by Purdue since the 1940s in a game, something like that. Wisconsin upsets Ohio State. Ohio State lost again tonight. Wisconsin beat Ohio State, and they only shot 38% from the field. And they got it done. A lot of contact in that game away from the ball, like the old impeding of progress through the lane. Wisconsin is playing Badger ball again. It was kind of outlawed there for a couple of years. Michigan State used to be really good at it. Now Wisconsin's getting people in some sumo matches, and they dragged Ohio State to a halt. As far as basketball goes, let's get to the basketball mailbag a little bit. A couple of questions here. Oh, what just happened? Sorry about the dead air there. Uper asks a question. That's his name, Uper. That's his handle over there at SpartanMag.com. His name is Uper. All these names that I name are handles. You guys know that. But some of the people that don't know about SpartanMag.com, that's why I call these people these names. His name is Uper. He says he's originally from McMillan/Newberry. Uper, I know exactly what you're talking about. McMillan and Newberry. My dad used to have a shack cabin on the corner of 28 and 117 between Newberry and McMillan. I've fished for some perch there a couple times. Is it Lake Manistee? Is that what it is over there? I've been over there. 28, yeah, Uper, on 28 and 117, up on that hill on the south corner by where those apples are, there used to be a cabin there that kind of had calico roof shingles. My dad would get whatever roofing shingles that he happened across during the year. He'd go back up there in hunting season and put on some new shingles. He had different color hunting shingles all over it. And if you're from there, you know the one I'm talking about. That was my dad's. Anyway, Uper says, seemed like against Kentucky and Duke, in the non-conference schedule, teams were running 2 guys out at Winston, which seemed to bother him and our offense. Why aren't the Big Ten teams doing that thus far? And should we expect them to start that at some point? Uper, check out the big brain on Uper. That's right. You're exactly right. And Duke did send 2 guys at him. And they would just flat out left Thomas Kithier and flashed 2 guys at Winston and made him get rid of the ball. Winston had a tough game against Duke. They did that against Aaron Henry, too. And they did a really good job denying Aaron Henry, and Henry a few times just kind of stopped working. He was getting denied, and he just kind of started floating. So Duke did a really good job coaching that game, and I mentioned it in the VCast. That guy, Mike Krzyzewski, newsflash, pretty good coach. Wasn't such a great coach last year, I didn't think. He's gotten back to really, really coaching X's and O's this year. Last year was more YMCA, freelance. This year, more screening, more structure, and that's why I think they're a threat to win the national championship. Newsflash, Duke's a threat. In a much different way than last year. So what happens and what works early in the season doesn't work so well after 10, 11, 12 practices, much less 20 or 30 practices. So what happens in November stays in November. What happens in November stays in November. So, but your point's a good one. Why haven't other teams done that? And you know what? They've only played 4 Big Ten teams. Rutgers didn't really do that. Michigan, they sat back with that sag ball screen defense. Michigan State calls it shacking it because late in his career, Shaquille O'Neal didn't come out on ball screens. He just stayed back, and that's why he couldn't play winning basketball anymore. He was still a force offensively, but defensively, point guards were getting open shots because he couldn't come out and play ball screens. There's different ways to play ball screens. You know that. You can sag off of it, or you can feather it and get a hedge help recover, or you can jump out and trap it and stop the point guard and do a hedge help recover off of that. Or you can do a straight switch. So Michigan last year couldn't do much of anything with Teskey. In this game, Brandon Johns was involved in some of those ball screens sometimes. So Michigan began shacking it, sagging it, playing back, and Winston, first shot of the game, open area at the elbow, made a couple of those. Michigan changed it a little bit. They trapped it one time, and when that happened, they had the big man, sometimes Teskey, maybe one time it might have been Davis, jumped out of the ball screen and trapped Winston. And Michigan State's automatic adjustment, they hit Tillman on the slip, and Tillman kicked it out to Gabe Brown, three-pointer. Michigan State had the counter to that. Boom, boom, right now. They did it one other time, and I think Brown missed a three-pointer. Michigan kind of stopped doing that. They feathered it once or twice. But like Juwan Howard said, after the game, no matter what defense you threw at him, Winston would make the immediate adjustment and attack it because every defense has a weakness. Michigan later threw a couple of junk zone defenses at him. I was trying to get a look at it. I'll have to look at it again. I'm not sure. I think it was not a box and one. It was not a triangle and two. It looked like it might have been a 1-3 chaser, or it was a matchup zone with a denial principle with Winston. It's kind of different. They didn't do it so well. Second time they showed it, Michigan State flashed Malik Hall. I almost called him Malik Hairston. Malik Hall, and I'll probably make that mistake soon because I always make that mistake about Julius Marble. Flashed Malik Hall to the foul line area, catch, shoot, easy as pie. So Michigan State adjusting to those defenses, but Michigan, they don't play good defense, guys. They don't play good defense. They try, kind of. Other stuff that they're doing now is also kind of a little shaky. Might talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But to get back to your point, why don't more teams do what Duke does? I think you could see something like that, but Kithier's and Bingham and Hall, they're more with it now than they would have been in November. So when you send a freak defense like that at Michigan State that early in the season, caught them off guard, worked really well. But again, later as the year goes along, especially against the Tom Izzo coach team, those things won't work as well. However, things will work if you don't get a stretch four that can stretch the defense and occupy a defender. Because if your four-man can't get out on the perimeter and make a defender go with them, then that defender can come in the lane and cause problems. A Kenny Goins type shooter needs to evolve, needs to rise up in order for this team to become a national championship contender. Izzo, a quote today, to your point, Uper. He says about Winston, he says, we are going to change things up and get him the ball more off the move because people are going to start defending him different ways. So we have to be proactive in how we are going to keep him in the mix, unquote. So Izzo anticipating the teams are going to start throwing some junk defenses at him. Want to get him on the move and do some offense on the move, which means as a two guard coming off screens, catch, pin down, curl, catch and shoot, that type of thing. He does it once or twice a half now. They want to do more. And since Marcus Watts is back now, you can start sharing the ball that way and going to Winston as a two guard and script those in. So that's one thing that's going to, they're aware that things are going to change and defenses aren't going to be as easy as Michigan was. That being said, there's another question here. All right. This goes into the next question. Brian from Flushing, Michigan says, was that Hoops game against Michigan a mirage? Or might we actually be starting to put something together here? That might have been the best, most dominant performance I have seen from Cassius Winston in his MSU career. I would agree. Career high, very efficient. He says, I could tell from the first 2 or 3 shots he took, he was going to have it going in that game. Well, you were right. Follow-up question, he says, is Michigan actually that good? All right, first question. Was the Michigan game a mirage, he asks. Well, I don't think Michigan State's going to shoot 52% against everybody. And there are going to be some losses coming up. 9 of the last 15 are on the road. The Big Ten's going to be tough. There's going to be some clunkers. There's going to be some games when shots don't fall. People are a little bit sluggish, and Izzo gets mad and benches people. It's going to happen. So it was not a mirage, but don't expect that every single game. Now, as far as Michigan goes, he asks, the guy from Flushing asks, is Michigan actually as good a team? Are they as good as the Michigan team that beat those top teams in November? Or was that a mirage too? I know they were without Livers, but dang, they looked terrible at Breslin. Good quote from the guy from Flushing here. Yeah, they'll be better when Livers comes back. It was easier to play defense against them without him, no question about it. So they'll be better on offense, especially at home. But the defense for Michigan, I thought they did some decent things against Illinois, even though they lost. Denial defense with some athleticism. But in terms of communication, I don't, it's not very good, and I don't know how good they're going to be at quality control with this new coaching staff. I mean, we know Phil Martelli's been great over the years. But the Big Ten is tough. Ask Ohio State. And if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. And Michigan's getting worse. And it would not shock me this year if they finish with a sub 500 record in the Big Ten. Would not surprise me. Jay Huddy says, where do you rank Cassius Winston all time at this current point? Where will you rank him with another Final Four or national championship? That's from James from Southfield. So another Final Four and a national championship. So you're talking 2 Final Fours and a national championship. That means he's going to be National Player of the Year. Then he would rank ahead of Cleaves and behind only Magic in terms of Michigan State's all-time greats if that happens. Because if that happens, he will have had a huge hand in it. I mean, I didn't see Jumpin' Johnny Green play. He only played for, 1 or 2 years maybe? Ralph Simpson, I didn't see Ralph Simpson. I barely saw him play at all. I was watching on here's another tangent, sorry. I was watching on the ESPN Classic channel, which no longer exists, but I used to like that. They took it off the air because all the stuff on it was analog rather than HD, so it started looking too outdated. It's too bad they got rid of that channel, but it was great. Before it went off the air, I was watching, it was NBA All-Star Weekend, and they were showing old NBA All-Star games. And they were showing an All-Star game from like 1971. And it was the NBA versus the ABA. I mean, it's a real basketball game. And I think it was either at it was at Madison Square Garden, I think, somewhere in New York, either Madison Square Garden or Nassau County Coliseum on Long Island. And Ralph Simpson checks into the game. And I was going, oh man, Ralph Simpson. I've never seen him play before. He's playing for the ABA. He gets it, takes a couple dribbles. They call him for palming the basketball. In an all-star game. ABA had a lead. And I don't know if the officials, I'm always curious about the officials. I don't know if they were ABA officials or NBA officials or what. But they called him like right away, palming the basketball. It was a real basketball game. Funny side note, Walt Frazier, the great point guard for the New York Knicks, at that All-Star game, he showed up late. He's late. Got there, checked into the game, played. The 70s. All right, let's see. Mike from West Palm Beach, Florida. Got one from Palm Beach, Florida. He goes by the name Spartan Spirit is his name on the message board over at SpartanMag.com. He says, after experiencing some early disappointing results and then lately looking somewhat like the team we all envisioned, do you think we can keep the upward trajectory? And do we have the goods to win the national championship? Yes, I think they got a chance. They have a lot of work to do, like Izzo says, but like Izzo says, they aren't as good as they're going to be. Most importantly, it doesn't look like there's any superpower in the country this year. I wouldn't be surprised. Last year Texas Tech came out of nowhere. Virginia didn't come out of nowhere. Texas Tech did. The first time Villanova won it, were they out of nowhere? Maybe not quite. Gonzaga was around a little bit. We've seen some teams make some strange runs to the Final Four, like Butler, and the one time Connecticut won. That was a surprise. It could be another year like that where someone comes out of nowhere because there's no superpower. Kentucky's struggling. North Carolina is not going to make the tournament. So a lot of the usual suspects aren't what they used to be. Virginia's had some problems. So for that reason, Kansas still has trouble with turnovers. Duke's shooting is still a question, although I think Duke's going to be tough. But yeah, Michigan State, if they can stay healthy, Mark Watts takes it. Malik Hall gets better and better. Yeah, they can do it. I heard Seth Greenberg talking about his current metric that in the last 4 years, nobody has made the Final Four while relying heavily on more than one freshman. If one freshman is okay, but if you're relying on more than one, nobody's really done much since that Kentucky team that went 39-1 or whatever it was. Michigan State is relying on Malik Hall, Rocket Watts, to play roles maybe a little more importantly than Izzo would prefer, obviously. That stretch four. I said it last year when they lost to Louisville that whether or not they developed a stretch four, namely Kenny Goins, he was a big determinant on how far that team could go. And 13 months ago, none of us had any idea that Kenny Goins could be what he became and that he could hit a game-winning shot against Duke in the Elite Eight. So that's what you need. Malik Hall, can he do that? I like the way Malik Hall moves laterally on defense. One time he boxed out or he muscled, ended up guarding Teskey and got low and moved him out of the post. Malik Hall. And at the end of the game, he was playing ball screen defense, and at the end of the game, Michigan State was switching all five. So ball screen, he was guarding Xavier Simpson. You probably noticed that, like Xavier Tillman did last year. He's low, he's wide, he's strong, he covers ground, he can move his feet well. Like Izzo said today, Malik Hall can guard 1 through 4 right now, maybe 1 through 5. When you can play defense like that against a number of people, you can stay on the court. He can shoot. Needs to get back to shooting like that. Will he hit a freshman wall? That's a concern. I was wondering what was going on against Illinois and Western Michigan when he was only playing 9 minutes, then 2 minutes. I'm like, man, his playing time's going south. What is going on with Malik Hall? Then he comes out in this game against Michigan, plays 18 minutes, finishes the game. They have him playing a different defensive responsibility than he's ever done before, and he did it well. It's like, okay, wow, that was like a 180 from what he did against Illinois. All right, so he's back on track. Important guy. Does he gas himself out? Freshman wall. It's a freshman. If he were a sophomore, the sophomore version of Malik Hall, what we envision that's going to look like, you put that guy with this team, it's a national championship team. Got a lot of work to do. We shall see. Okay, recruiting. You guys been waiting 95 minutes. And got a recruiting question. P. Kinsler from Tip City, Ohio asks, any updates on 2020 basketball recruiting? In terms of movement, with the 2021s, they're in on some good ones, and I'm not sure who they are, targeting as the A-plus guy. I mean, they really like Caleb First. Caleb First was at the Michigan game this weekend. Other people that were at the Michigan game. Pierre Brooks was there, 6'5" wing from Detroit Frederick Douglass. And Michigan offered him this week. Pierre Brooks. Jaden Akins, 6'3" guard from Farmington. He was at the game. Caleb First was at the game. Caleb First is a 6'9" power forward from Fort Wayne. He's ranked the number 31 junior in the country by Rivals.com. He was there. Brooks and Akins are backcourt guys. They're also looking at Kobe Buffkin out of Grand Rapids. All three of those guys have been to Michigan State a lot, and they're all very good. Michigan State likes all of them. Michigan State's in a really good spot for all three, I think. But there's not room for all three. Similarly, Michigan State once upon a time was in a really good position for Cassius Winston and Xavier Simpson, and they had to make a choice. What's going to happen with these guys? I don't know. Is Pierre Brooks different enough from Jaden Akins to have room for both of them? They'd probably like to have that problem. But right now, Michigan State's only going to have one senior next year. So if nobody moves on, there's not room for more than one. And you like Caleb First a lot, so I'm not sure what's going to happen there. But they're in good shape with some good ones there. As far as 2022's current sophomores, Jason Drake was at the Michigan game on Sunday. He's from Orchard Lake St. Mary's. Interesting prospect. And a kid named Jaden Schutt from Illinois. He's from Yorkville, Illinois, 6'4". He has one offer from Illinois Chicago. He's one to watch because he recently set a state record in Illinois for three-pointers made in a game. Dude had 17 three-pointers in a game. I got to double-check that one. Jaden Schutt. I don't know if it's Schutt or Shoot. Anyway, he was a guy they had there. But in terms, they still have their ear to the ground on Jalen Terry. That ship has probably sailed, but they still have their ear to the ground on that one. But they're in good position with some good in-state talent. It's like old school recruiting. That's going to be fun. Let's go back over here and get rid of these questions. Not get rid of them, but go through them real quick. I appreciate everybody that's posted these questions, and I want to get through all of them because we appreciate the contributions that you're making here. 313 Hitman says Arns still banged up. I went over that earlier. It's day to day with him. Izzo said today that Arns is basically has to sit out every other practice. That's the way they're going to have to manage that for the rest of the year. And they feel like, well, at least they know that. That's the way they're going to attack it. So they're managing the situation there. But he came in, hit a three-pointer. They will continue to need that. Playing good enough defense, scraps hard, maybe not all on defense that he maybe could have been or used to be. His back cuts are still good, but Michigan was on those back cuts, on those pressure releases. Had a great back cut last year against Michigan. Tried another one this year, but they covered it a little bit better. All right. Mr. T-Bone says, I was having a conversation with some guys asking, is Cassius the second best player in Spartan history behind Magic? We talked about that a moment ago. He's getting there. He is getting there. Hayden Vischer says, Corey, who has been your favorite recruit to cover over the years? And he says, favorite is hard because so many of them have trusted me with their information. I could probably give a handful, but would be afraid to leave someone out. I can answer that later after some thought. That's fair enough. I thought Corey was going to dodge the question, but he says he wants to give it more thought. I can respect that. Good question, good answer. All right. A lot of comments here. Any more 2020 football recruits? Corey Robinson saying 1 to 3 more would be his guests for the 2020 class. Jordan Simmons, Frank Brown, and Ennis Rakeshaw are some names. Hayden Vischer sounds good. Doesn't have to be someone who committed to MSU either. Okay, what do we have here? Oakland Bears was lunch food to us. Yeah, they were. The Grizzlies. 313, very prolific with his comments tonight. I appreciate that. Craven Crumsify says, was there a reason that Jordan Simmons didn't sign in the early period? Corey Robinson takes it, says Simmons wants the whole family up to visit Michigan State first, get a look at Michigan State in January, the month of January when it's cold. Still feeling like everything will check out and he will sign in February with Michigan State. That's Corey's prediction. Corey's got a better handle on it than I do. I've not talked to anyone from the Simmons clan in a few weeks. I think Corey's checked in with him a couple of times. But I don't think it's a coincidence that Simmons decided not to visit. They're saying it's because they want the whole family to visit in January. Just like Keith Nickel took a visit to Oklahoma as a fact-finding mission that one year. I don't think it's a coincidence that maybe they want to wait and see with Samuel. Did they gain some sense that something might be going on there? I don't know. His dad was here in East Lansing for the summer camp when Jordan Simmons was here. So his dad has seen it. He's seen the facilities. He's seen the whole operation. And he was impressed with everything and the way Michigan State went about recruiting him. They want the whole family to see him. I'll take that as at face value now also, like Corey is. Mom wants to come up and so forth. Okay. Doors fan checking in. He's finally here after hanging out at Dagwoods. He says no changes and MD will lose the fan base. Doors fan says, better hope he wins 8 or more next year and beat Michigan. Like to see Barnett back at the very least. I think Harlan Barnett will be back. I was going to say this earlier. Very good sources from two directions are telling me that Harlan Barnett has spoken with Michigan State. Both sides very interested. And Michigan State wants to make room for him somehow. I don't know if that means analyst or one of the DB coaches. You would think, ideally, put him on the field to coach DBs because DBs. So it's not a done deal yet, but from what I'm hearing, very good chance. Not a done deal. I mean, no contract, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's a handshake agreement right now. I think it's going to happen. I think we're going to see Barnett back. Two different sources say they've been talking, and basically Dantonio, from what I've heard, has said, hey, we want you. We'll figure something out. So, Doors fan. George Z says, if Dantonio doesn't make some serious coaching changes, then he will have to go. Consecutive years of absolute abysmal offense and linemen that can't stay healthy. It's becoming a culture thing at MSU. Fair enough. Joe Savage says, Dantonio does not have the hunger he once had. Who would in his situation? Fair enough. Doors fan says, need some recruiters and energy out there on the recruiting trail. Can't argue with that, Doors fan. Doors fan says, 2020 could get ugly. It would pain me to see the fans turn on MD all year long. MD being Mark Dantonio. I hear you. There's no easy way out. There's no shortcut home. No, I'm not going to sing. 313 Hitman's back in the ring. He says, it's also because we got a fluffy AD that is too comfortable. Joe Savage says, Michigan and State both are the same place. Not happy with their current coach, but don't have confidence they can go out and get anyone better. Interesting observation. Probably right. Chicago Spartan says, Mark Richt and Mark Dantonio are very similar people, both great men, both religious men, and both great leaders. They know it's on them and not the people underneath them. That is a good comparison between those two. One difference is that Dantonio took Michigan State to its maximum potential. Mark Richt didn't quite do that with Georgia. George Z. Well, I'd say Dantonio took Michigan State to the 98th percentile of its potential. If Connor Cook had read cover 2 cloud at the goal line at the end of the first half against Alabama in the 2015 college football playoff at Jerry's World Cotton Bowl Stadium, at the Cotton Bowl, Final Four. If he reads that and throws a touchdown and it goes in 10-7 at halftime instead of throwing an interception, and Michigan State hangs in it a little longer, doesn't give up the punt return touchdown, maybe gets a break like a sack, scoop, score, touchdown, and somehow steals that game from Alabama. I know that sounds crazy, but they were in it at halftime, kind of. If they had beaten Alabama, then Michigan State would have hit 100% max. I mean, they still might have lost to Clemson, but Dantonio would have hit 100% maximum potential of what you could do in the program. I'll put it at 98, which is damn good. My first swear word of 2020. Happy New Year, everybody. I don't think I said that. George Z. Bad offensive years. That statement was as bad as using a war reference to hiring a coach. Don't compare any game of which is football to war, please, and thank you. You're right, George. That was a bad analogy. My bad. Jay Marison says, is there any news about the result of MSU football's annual self-appraisal? In other words, are the coaching changes being proposed involve just the offensive staff? Good questions, and no one knows. Very quiet. Dantonio's not a person that's going to go out and talk. A lot of assistant coaches aren't going to talk either because I'm not sure they know where they stand. Well, they do this week. So in terms of how the postseason self-appraisal meetings go, no. I mean, it's not like we can watch those on C-SPAN. I've been listening to our sources, but things are going to be limited. I understand the need for information there, but I don't have anything on exactly how those meetings are going. Doors fan, any info on Cam Martinez and who is recruiting him for Michigan State? Cam Martinez from Muskegon, and Mike Tressel was the guy coaching Muskegon or recruiting Muskegon for years for Michigan State. I think he still is, but Mark Staten is involved over there on the west side also. I think it's Tressel still. Martinez was committed to Ohio State over Michigan State. You guys know that for a long time. Was going to sign with Ohio State, decided not to. It's our understanding that Ohio State wanted him as a defensive back. He wants to play offense. He was a state championship quarterback. Michigan State, he wants to play wide receiver. Michigan State is set at the wide receiver position. Dantonio said that on signing day. He said that's the one position that they would not entertain taking a transfer. Jaden Reed, the guy last year, I forgot to mention him earlier. When we were talking about the offense, I forgot to mention Jaden Reed. He's a big part of that offense. With Mosley, Cody White, Jalen Naylor, Jaden Reed, good receivers. So, Cam Martinez, Michigan State likes him. It's my understanding Michigan State, because of that situation, would recruit him as a defensive back, being forthright, honest with him. Well, that's what Ohio State wanted him as. So it's looking now like he's trending toward Minnesota. Michigan State liked him. If he had decommitted from Ohio State 3 months ago, would Michigan State have gone after him instead of the Foster kid from Cleveland? Maybe, maybe not. But Foster's a different type of bigger, stronger receiver. Not really the same slot in the roster. Okay, Corey Robinson says Brad Salem is recruiting Cat Martinez. I didn't realize that. All right, and Jordan Simmons is visiting Michigan State January 17th. So not this weekend, but the weekend after. Great info from Corey Robinson, as usual. Kyle Tansel asks, Kareem Maine still an option? Yes. My bad. Should have mentioned him. The point guard from Montreal, 6'4". Izzo went up and saw him, 3 weeks ago? Loved him. He's intrigued with Michigan State. They expect him to come in to visit this winter. They're expecting him to visit. So that's looking favorable. Big guard. They like him. They like him a lot. We'll see where that goes. And that's going to do it. Wiped the question board clean. Really appreciate all of the Spartan Maggers out there that subscribe to SpartanMag.com and being a part of the Spartan Mag community. I appreciate the comments, positive and negative. The negative comments I take to heart, try to get better. Appreciate all the questions, the people taking time to post questions, the people taking time out of your busy Tuesday night to step in with us and talk some Michigan State sports. We will plan to do it again next week. Mondays aren't great for me. Got to take the kid to hockey practice on Mondays. We'll have to see. Maybe Tuesday again next week. I don't even know, looking ahead, whether Michigan State plays basketball next Tuesday. I don't know what day of the week they play. I live my life about 4 days at a time. The VCast on Sunday, talking about the Gophers playing Michigan State, I assumed it was on the road because Michigan State had already played 3 home games. I had no idea they're playing, 4 of their 5 first Big Ten games at home, but they are. Anyway, again, we appreciate everybody and all your support for SpartanMag.com. If you're not a subscriber to this site, click the subscribe button. If you're not a subscriber to SpartanMag.com, we invite you to go over there, check it out. You can get it 1 month free. We've got that link below. I'll put it below so you can find that. If you're still with us, we appreciate you checking us out. We'll see you next time. Thank you, Maggers, for supporting SpartanMag.com. We'll see you next time from East Lansing, Michigan. My name is Jim Comparoni, publisher of SpartanMag.com. You've been watching Spartan Mag Live. Thank you.